This first question is for George. George, in your experience, what are the most important drivers that determine where your clients locate their industrial facilities? Is it a couple to mention: labor, human resources, logistics, transportation costs, or incentives?
From a budget perspective, they're all important capital costs, and we find that most of the companies that we've been dealing with, both private and public, have been evaluating those costs when they do their site selection. But even prior to that, we have seen, and I think the panelists and many of you with your clients are spending a lot more time and resources to evaluating their customer base, where they are, where they're trending to go. And I think a lot of the decisions will follow that track. So when they do their supply chain analysis, they'll find more about where they're going and what is about their businesses than I think they even realize sometimes. And through that process, back to your question, then they analyze their expensive costs, their labor, transportation. They're probably two of the larger costs that typically arrive in the analysis. And then, of course, incentives to follow once they follow that, what direction and where labor and transportation are going.
You know, when you really look at the Big Five, and I'll articulate that from, and that comes from the African term of all the Big Five animals, right? So the Big Five are Southern California, Inland Empire, Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, New Jersey. And when you look at those, and California is always going to recover first. It just seems to do it. It's doing it now. It's been doing it. To the tune of, in 2011, we have 23 million of positive net absorption. How do you like that number? It's astounding. And their vacancy now is 6%. 6% in Chicago. Every developer in the room, raise your hand if you put a shovel in the ground. Maybe not. So here's the thing. They put the shovel in the ground in Southern California and they leased them up. 400 to 600 at the end of last year leased, and a couple more 600s coming out of the ground. So yes, spec is back in some fashion. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But if you look at the national overview, you know, we're at a 9.5% vacancy rate as of the end of Q1 in the United States, if you believe the statistics. In 2010, it was nearly 11%. Here's the killer. Negative absorption in 2009 hit a high of minus 50 million feet, compared to positive absorption of 21 million in the first quarter of 12. Hey, 70 million square foot swing. Yes, we are in a recovery. And it went from 58 million supply, new supply, to 2 million. 2 million in the first quarter of 2010. 2 million. Now, first quarter 12, we're looking at 6 million feet, and that doesn't count all the stuff that people are actually talking about. Now, how does Chicago fare? Chicago vacancy, we're about 10.25, and a change from a year ago is over 12. So clearly we're recovering, but we know that we can make a big swing in those numbers, given leasing up some of the boxes. And how many boxes do we have now? Ding ding, 1, 2, over 500? Not a lot. So, you know, if that big company with the C would do a deal, then we'd have 0 over 500 that was meaningful. So here it is, we're poised.
What is driving demand with your clients regionally, nationally, and internationally? Is it growth, consolidation, cost savings, new market entry, supply chain analysis, or trying to get closer to existing customers?
What's driving some of the folks that we're working with, which are some manufacturers, is consolidation.
As far as the consolidation, I've seen, particularly with our clients, they're really trying to reduce their overall real estate footprint. And in conjunction with that, I think part of that relates to somewhat to a smaller degree with the past 13 upcoming regulations. I think corporate real estate companies, or real estate users, I should say, are trying to get a lot smarter with what they actually have as far as real estate. A lot of these big corporations have no idea how many locations they have. And part of that has been driven by this past 13 issue. The other part, I think, speaking to Dan's point, is that they're trying to reduce the overall cost, obviously, as far as consolidation is concerned.
do you think the FAS is, even though it's a factor, they keep pushing it back? So any thoughts on how far back that'll go in terms of what you're hearing from your clients?
You know, I think they're prepping for probably the 2014, 2015 date. To be candid, I'll probably get slipped, I mean, because of the way the whole bureaucracy works. Having said that, I'm aware of at least one of our clients who is setting up a dedicated team to do a critical analysis of all their locations, and they're also employing outside resources to understand exactly what the implications are, from a balance sheet standpoint and otherwise.
Lynn, this one's for you. What hot topics are your clients analyzing with regards to how they view their real estate footprint? A couple to mention: creating efficiencies, counting standards with the FASB, collaboration and outsourcing, 3PL or 4PL, or efforts towards sustainability.
Well, I think what we've seen happen over the last couple of years is this drive to the consolidation. And in doing that, it means bigger land sites and a smaller coverage number on these buildings. What does that bode well for the next generation of spec as to how we're going to look at that and how we're going to design to that? Because I'll tell you right now, no, I better not say it to my friends in the room, a blank foot truck court may be like the beta machine soon. So, I think that we need to be cognizant of that. The trucks are getting bigger. The time they have to sit there is getting longer because of the driver rules. And so we're not sure how that's going to really play with the 1,000,000 footers or the 60s or the 600. Is it an 800? So I think you've got your customers looking at that, and they're looking at on-site queue lanes, and they're looking at 195-foot trailer courts and those kinds of things. And I think that if we're going to play in the big box world, that's really what they're going to be looking for as far as efficiencies go. And then as far as the build-to-suit side of the equation, again, some of these Home Depot kind of deals are going to drive the build-to-suits because you can't find a building like what they're looking for. And interestingly enough, there are some over 1,000,000 footers on the build-to-suit side that went to the non-Big Five locations, like Fort Wayne, Indiana, Charleston, and places like that. So it's very interesting where some of these are actually landed.
Ryan, this one's directed at you. You do a lot of multi-market international business. There's been a lot of discussion on the topic of reshoring manufacturing to the U.S. Not sure if we've seen a lot of that here in Chicago yet. In your opinion, is there anything behind this? And for all of you, how does that impact Chicago in your opinion?
In my experience, the only reshoring we're seeing right now domestically is tied to the oil and gas industry. Specifically, we're working on a few projects in Houston right now. As it relates to anything closer than that, I think there's going to be an uptick in manufacturing, new construction in Mexico, particularly because there's still a significant labor cost delta there. And from a logistics standpoint, as these guys know, it still makes a lot of sense to do that. From a more global perspective, what I've been seeing is that larger corporations are starting to penetrate more and more into Eastern Europe, what they consider to be, quote, best cost countries, where they're setting up engineering centers and manufacturing centers. As you might imagine, they're pulling entirely out of Western Europe, so we've had a lot of old manufacturing dispositions as of late. And then as far as China, we've heard rumblings of some of that manufacturing coming back.
I reached out to my friend Mark Good and said, Mark, you're the onshore guy now, and so give me some goodies. And actually, there's some very interesting stuff by the Boston Consulting Group. I won't bore you, but within a 5-year period, here's what they think, which I find very interesting. Transportation, computers, fabricated steel, machinery, plastics, and rubber, appliance and electrical equipment, not so much furniture. I think we're not a furniture hub, never would. But with the exception of that, the other industries actually over the decades were backbones of Chicago manufacturing. At one time, and are we now positioned to take advantage of that potential? I'm not saying it's happening, right, Ryan? But the potential, because the Chinese are making more money. What does that mean? They're going to buy more stuff. They're going to buy more stuff in China. It's not all coming here. So if we're the biggest exporter to China who exports to Europe, and Europe has, are you following me? And Europe has a downturn, then what's going to happen with all of that stuff, right? And why wouldn't the United States be manufacturing on the shores here based on that? Because their labor costs are rising. It's not the most cheapest place now, right? I mean, you see this?
I agree with you. I think specifically China, the labor costs are rising. Corporations are seeing the delta between, obviously the savings you have manufacturing over there, bringing it back. I think that delta is, it's narrowing at this point.
And a risk and quality?
Of course.
Risk and quality.